struck with the extreme breadth of the Orinoco between the mouth of the Apure and the rock of Kimia. Humboldt has ascertained it by means of a base measured twice on the western breach. The bed of the Orinoco at low water was over 6,000 feet broad, but this breadth was increased to 32,000 feet in the rainy seasons. The travelers first proceeded southwest as far as the shore inhabited by the Goriocoto Indians on the left half bank of the Orinoco, and then advanced straight towards the south. The river was so broad that the mountains of Aricamada appeared to rise from the water as if they lay above the horizon of the sea. They formed a continued chain from east to west. These mountains were composed of enormous blocks of granite, cleft and piled one upon the another. What contributed above all to the embellish of the scene at Aricamada was the luxuriance of vegetation that covered the sides of the rock, leaving bare only the rounded summits. They looked like ancient ruins rising in the midst of a forest. In the port of Aramada, they met with some Caribs of Panapahana. A creek was going up to the Orinoco in his canoe to join in the famous fishing of turtles' eggs. His canoe was rounded towards the bottom and followed by a smaller boat. He was seated beneath a sort of tent, constructed like the sail of palm leaves. His cold and silent gravity, the respect of which he was treated by his attendants, everything denoted to him to be a person of importance. He was equipped, however, in the same manner as his Indians. They were all equally naked, armed with bows and arrows, and painted with onoto. The chief, the domestics, the furniture, and the boat, and the sail were all painted red. These Caribs were men of almost athletic stature. They appeared to the travelers much taller than any Indians they had hitherto seen. Their smooth and thick hair cut short on the forehead, like that of choisters. Their eyebrows painted black. Their look, at once gloomy and animated, gave a singular expression to their countenance. The women, who were very tall and disgusting from their want of cleanliness, carried their infants on their backs. The thighs and legs of the infants were bound at certain distances by broad strips of cotton cloth, and the flesh strongly composed beneath the ligatures, and swelled in the interstices. Near Aricamada, a very long island divided the river into two branches. They passed the night in a rocky creek opposite of the mouth of Rio Cabule, which was formed by the Paria and the Antimasia. The evening was beautiful. The moon illuminated the tops of the granite rocks. The heat was so uniformly distributed that, notwithstanding the humidity of the air, no twinkling of the stars was observable, even at 4 or 5 degrees above the horizon. Towards midnight, the northeast wind became extremely violent. It brought no clouds, but the vault of the sky was covered more and more with vapors. Strong gusts were felt, and made them fear for the safety of their canoe. During this whole day they had seen very few crocodiles, but all of an extraordinary size, from 20 to 24 feet. The Indians assured them that the young crocodiles preferred the marshes and the rivers that were less broad and less deep. Speaking of the mountains of Arakamata, Humboldt says that the natives of those countries had retained the belief that at the time of the great waters, when their fathers were forced to have recourse to boats to escape the general inundation, the waves of the sea beat against the rocks of the Encaramada. This belief was not confined to one nation singly, it was made part of a system of historical tradition, at which he found scattered notions among the Mapiers of the Great Cataracts, among the Indians of the Rio Erevanto, and among almost all the tribes of the upper Orinoco. When the Indians were asked how the human race survived this great deluge, they said a man and a woman saved themselves on a high mountain called Tamanaku, situated on the banks of the Aseveru, and casting beside them over their heads the fruits of the Maritia palm tree. They saw the seeds contained in those fruits produce men and women who repeopled the earth. A few leagues from Encaramada, a rock called the Painted Rock rose in the middle of the savannah. Upon it was traced representations of animals and symbolic figures. Between the banks of the Cassiquiare and the Orinoco, between Encaramada, the Cappuccino, and Caracara, these hieroglyphs were often seen at very great heights on rocky cliffs, which could be accessible only by constructing very lofty scaffolds. When the natives were asked how these figures could have been sculpted, they answered with a smile as if relating a fact of which only a white man could be ignorant, that at the period of the great waters, their fathers went to that height in boats. A fresh breeze carrying the travelers toward the Boca de la Tortuga. They landed at an island in the middle of the river. The island was celebrated for the turtle fishery, or, as it was called there, the harvest of eggs. They took place annually. Here the travelers found an assemblage of Indians encamped under their huts made of palm leaves. The encampment contained more than 300 persons, accustomed since they had left San Fernando de Apure to see only desert shores. They were singularly struck by the bustle that prevailed here. They found, besides the Guamos and the Otomacs of Urana, who were both considered as savage races, Caribs and other Indians of the lower Orinoco. Every tribe was separately encamped and was distinguished by the pigments with which their skin was painted. Some white men were seen amidst this tumultuous assemblage, chiefly pulperos, or little traders of Angostura, who had come up the river to purchase turtle oil from the natives. The missionary of Urana, a native of Alcala, came to meet Humboldt and Bonpland, and he was extremely astonished at seeing them. After having admired their instruments, he gave them an exaggerated picture of the sufferings to which they would be necessarily exposed in the ascending of the Orinoco beyond the cataracts. The object of their journey appeared to him very mysterious. "How is it possible to believe," said he, "that you have left your country to come and be devoured by mosquitoes on this river, and to handle lands that are not your own, measure lands that are not your own?" They were happily furnished with recommendations from the superior of the Franciscan missionaries and the brother-in-law of the governor of Varinas, who accompanied them soon dissipated the doubts to which their dress, their accent, and their arrival in the sandy island had given rise among the whites. The missionary invited them to partake a frugal repast of fish and plantains. He told them that he had come to encamp with the Indians during the time of the harvest of the eggs, to celebrate Mass every morning in the open air, to procure the oil necessary for the church lamps, and especially to govern this mixed republic in which everyone wished to profit singly by what God had granted to all. They made the tour of the island, accompanied by the missionary and by a trader, who boasted of having for 10 successive years visited the camp of the Indians and tended the turtle fishery. They were on a plain of sand, perfectly smooth, and were told that as far as they could see along the beach, turtle eggs were concealed under a layer of earth. The missionaries carried a long pole in his hand. He turned that by this means of the pole to the extent of the stratum of eggs could be determined as accurately as the miner determines the limits of a bed of marl, of bog iron ore, or of coal. Thrusting the rod perpendicularly into the ground, the sudden want of resistance showed that the cavity or layer of loose earth containing the eggs had been reached. They saw that the stratum was generally spread with so much uniformity that the pole found it anywhere in a radius of 60 foot around of any given spot. Here they talked continually of square perches of eggs. It was like a mining country, divided into lots and worked with the greatest regularity. The stratum of eggs, however, was far from covering the whole island. They were not found wherever the ground rose abruptly, because the turtles would not mount heights. The Indians assured them that in going up the Orinoco from its mouth to the junction of the Apure, not one island or one beach was to be found where eggs could be collected in abundance. The great turtle dreads places inhabited by men, or much frequented by boats. It is a timid and mistrustful animal, raising only its head above the water, and hiding itself at the least noise. The period at which it lays its egg coincides with the period of the lowest waters. The Orinoco beginning to increase from the vernal equinox, the lowest flats are found uncovered from the end of January till the 20th or 25th of March. There were turtles collect in troops in the month of January, then issue from the water and warm themselves in the sun, reposing on the sand. The Indians believed that the great heat was indispensable to the health of the animals, and that its exposure to the sun favored the laying of eggs. They are found on the beach a great part of the day during the whole month of February. At the beginning of March, the straggling troops assemble and swim towards the small number of islands on which they habitually deposit their eggs. At this period, a few days before they lay their eggs, thousands of these animals may be ranged in long files on the borders of the islands of Paru, Uranu, and Puruma, stretching out their necks and holding their heads above water to see whether they have anything to dread. The Indians, who are anxious that the bands which assembled should not separate, that the turtles should not disperse, and that the laying of eggs should be performed tranquilly, place sentinels at certain distances along the shore. The people who pass in boats are told to keep in the middle of the river and not frighten the turtles by cries, The laying of the eggs takes place always during the night, and it begins soon after sunset, with its hind feet, which are very long and furnished with crooked claws. The animal digs a hole of 3 feet in diameter, or 2 feet in depth. These turtles feel so pressing a desire to lay their eggs that some of them descend into holes that have been dug by others, but which are not yet covered with earth. There they deposit a new layer of eggs on which has been recently laid. In this tumultuous movement, an immense number of eggs are broken. The missionary showed that the travelers, by removing the sand in several places, that this loss probably amounted to a fifth of the whole quantity. The yelk of the broken eggs contribute in drying to cement the sand, and they found very large creations of grains of quartz and broken shells. The number of animals working on the beach during the night is so considerable that the day surprises them, many of them, before the laying of the eggs is terminated. They are then urged on the double necessity of depositing their eggs and closing the holes that they have dug, that they may not be perceived by the jaguars. The turtles that remain too late are insensible to their own danger. They work in the presence of the Indians, who visit the beach at a very early hour, and who call them mad turtles. Notwithstanding the rapidity of the movements, they are then easily caught with both the hands. The encampments formed by the Indians began about the end of March or commencement of April. The gathering of the eggs, which was conducted in a uniform manner, and the regularity which characterized all monastic institutions. Before the arrival of the missionaries on the banks of the river, the Indians profited much less from a production which nature had supplied in such abundance. Every tribe searched the beach in its own way, and an immense number of broken eggs were useless because they were not dug up with precaution, and more eggs were uncovered that could be carried away. It was like a mine worked by unskillful hands. When the camp was formed, the missionary of Urana named his lieutenant or commissionary, who divided the ground where the eggs were found into different portions, according to the number of the Indian tribes who took part in the gathering. The lieutenant began his operations by sounding. He examined, by means of a long wooden pole or cane of bamboo, how far the stratum of eggs extended. This stratum, according to the measurements of Humboldt, extended to the distance of 120 feet from the shore. Its average depth was 3 feet. The lieutenant placed marks to indicate the points where each tribe should stop its labors. The Indians removed the earth with their hands. They placed the eggs that they had collected in small baskets, carried them to their encampment, and threw them into the long troughs of wood filled with water. In these troughs, the eggs, broken and stirred with shovels, remained exposed to the sun until the oily part, which swam on the surface, had begun to insipate. As fast as this collected on the surface of the water, it was taken off and boiled over a quick fire. This animal oil, called turtle butter, kept the better in proportion as it had undergone a strong ebullition. When well prepared, it was limpid and odorous and scarcely yellow. The missionaries compared it to the best olive oil, and it was used not merely for burning in lamps, but for cooking. It was not easy, however, to procure oil of turtle eggs quite pure. It was generally a putrid smell owing to the mixture of eggs in which the young were already formed. The Indians brought away a great number of eggs to eat them dried in the sun, and when they broke a considerable number through carelessness during the gathering. The number of eggs that were hatched before the people could dig them up was so prodigious that near the encampment of Urana, Humboldt saw the whole shore of the Orinoco swarming with little turtles, an inch in diameter, escaping with difficulty from the pursuit of the Indian children. At the Playa de Huevos, where their pilots had anchored to purchase provisions at their store having begun to run short, the travelers found fresh meat angostura rice and even biscuit made of wheat flour. Their Indians filled the boats with little live turtles and eggs dried in the sun for their own use. Having taken leave of the missionary of Urana, who had treated them with great kindness, they set sail about 4 in the afternoon. The wind was fresh and blew in squalls. Since they had entered the mountainous parts of the country, they had discovered that their canoes carried sail very badly. But Master was delirious of showing the Indians who assembled on the beach that, by going close to the wind, he could reach at one single track in the middle of the river. At every moment when he was boasting of his dexterity and the boldness of his maneuver, the force of wind upon the sail became so great that they were on point of going down. One side of the boat was under water when rushed in with such violence that it was soon up to their knees. It washed over a little table at which Humboldt was riding at the stern of the boat. He had some difficulty in saving his journal, and in an instant they saw their books, papers, and dried plants all afloat. Bonpland was lying asleep in the middle of the canoe, awakened by the entrance of water and the cries of the Indians. He understood the danger of the situation, while he maintained a coolness which he had always displayed in the most difficult circumstances, the lee side righting itself from time to time during the squall. He did not consider the boat as lost. He thought it that they were even forced to abandon it, they might save themselves by swimming, since there were no crocodiles in sight. Amidst the uncertainty, the cordage of the sail suddenly gave way. The same gust of wind that had thrown them on their beam served also to right them. They labored to bail the water out in the boat with calabashes. The sail was again set, and in less than a half hour they were in a state to proceed. The wind now abated a little. Squalls alternating with dead calms were common in the part of the Orinoco which were bordered by mountains. They were very dangerous for boats deeply laden without decks. The travelers had escaped by miracle. To the reproaches that were heaped on their pilot for having kept too near the wind, he replied that with the phlegmatic coolness peculiar to the Indians, observing that the whites would find sun enough on those banks to dry their papers. They lost only one book, the first volume of the Genera Plantarum of Schweber, which had fallen overboard. At nightfall they landed on a barren island in the middle of the river, near the mission of Urana. They supplied in the clear moonlight, seating themselves on large turtle shells that were found scattered about the beach.